Hello everyone. If you're seeing this video, it means that I've been delayed on my trip to Ukraine, and I apologize that I've not been able to be with you. Please forgive me. Ukraine's a difficult place, and we're going to be in the Donbass and in Zaporizhia, and it's a part of the world where things can go wrong. So I hope to be back with you soon. Please bear with me. Now, I had a little mishap yesterday. I got out my old car that I play with. It's a Toyota Supra. And I got it going and I took it for an MOT and it passed. And the only advisory was passenger seat missing. That's because I've taken it out to reupholster it. Anyway, I was dead pleased by this, and I went off to Tesco's in Henley. And I did my shopping, and I was on my way back. And there was a car behind me, which was a big Porsche. And it suddenly started flashing its lights and sounding its horn. So I pulled in, and I wound down my window, and the Porsche man said, "Your car's on fire." And he drove off. So I opened the bonnet, and I had a look underneath, and it was lots of smoke, and shortly followed by flames. And I was doing what I could to try and smother the flames and poke away at wherever they were coming from, when a taxi drew up. It was a battered Toyota Prius, and the driver got out, and he was an Asian man, and in his hand he had a dry powder fire extinguisher, which is exactly what I needed and didn't happen to have with me. So we dealt with the fire very rapidly, and the car would still start and run. So that was great. And I said to him, "I'm so grateful to you. Can I pay you for the fire extinguisher?" No, he said, "not at all. And here's a bottle of water just in case you have any other problem." And he said, I'm going off now to Sunning Common to pick up a fare, and I'm going to come back this way, and I'll make sure you're all right." And afterwards, thinking about it, I thought, this is like the parable of the Good Samaritan, isn't it? I was like the poor man who'd been set upon and beaten up by events, not by anybody, but by events, and the event in question was that a mouse had built its nest between the turbo and the exhaust manifold of my car. So it got hotter and hotter till it burst into flames. And then there were all these people who drove past whilst I was there trying to tackle the flames. And then I was helped by somebody who was not expert particularly, but prepared and happy to give me what he had brought as a precaution for himself. So he was like the Good Samaritan who took the man who'd been mugged off to a local inn and paid for him to be looked after and healed. And the Good Samaritan said, "And when I come back, I shall come and pay you for all your costs. So I'm paying the bill, but you, Mr. Innkeeper, please do the work." So there we are. These parables are brilliant things, and they are written to teach us lessons. And yesterday I was taught such a lesson, and I'm grateful, firstly, that the problem wasn't worse, because my poor old car didn't suffer any damage that I can find other than a bit of burnt electrical wiring, and it still works. And the man who was in a position, but not under an obligation to help, did just that. And so, thanks to God that I got away lightly from a situation that could have been pretty difficult. And thanks to this man of unknown name, who stopped and helped me when he didn't have to. Now, we heard in our call to worship today a reading from 2 Timothy. And in this reading, we're told various things about God. And one of them is that God will always be faithful to you, because he cannot deny himself. In other words, God's nature is to help you, and he will do just that. And he will do it even if you're not faithful to him. But, says Paul in this letter to Timothy, but if you deny God, he will deny you. And one of the problems of our society today is that people think it's okay to deny God. So, at least in normal times, they will very often say, well, I don't believe in God. It's just loads of old stories and myths and not to be taken seriously in a scientific age. And I don't want to get entangled with that, because here we are in a scientific age, and we have to decide how to relate to God. And it's a bit like being, I think, on public transport. Imagine you're on a bus or maybe on the train, and you're sitting down and there are people all around you. And you don't particularly take any notice of them. You don't have a relationship with them. There's no need to speak to them unless you fancy doing it. And it has to be said that most of the time, most people don't fancy doing it. But what we learn, particularly from Martin Luther, who got the Reformation going in North Germany, is Martin Luther says, God's always there. It's like the person sitting or standing next to you on public transport. God's always there, and it's up to you whether you turn towards God or not. So the decision is yours. You can turn towards God, and frankly, that's why we're here today, all of us. We come to church in order to be reminded and to be restored in the habit of turning towards God. And when we stop going to church and don't take much notice of God, because we're so preoccupied with all the urgent things in our life that we just don't get round to it, then we are, in a sense, denying God. Because God needs our attention. And what Martin Luther says is, if you turn towards God, God will turn God's self towards you. So just go back to that little parallel of you sitting on the train or the bus, and there's a person near you, maybe even next to you, and you turn to them and you open the conversation somehow. It doesn't matter how, it can be completely trivial. But once you have opened that conversation, then God can respond. Now, I think it's quite healthy that we should think of this situation, this generic situation, as one in which the first move has to come from us, because it makes it easier to understand. Though, of course, it is true to say that God has reminded us in so many ways of how we should respond to him. Now, we had that reading from 2 Timothy as our call to worship. But we had two other readings as well. The first from Jeremiah, and the second from the second book of Kings. And so let's just pick up on what Jeremiah says, because it's an interesting reminder. And my taxi driver friend, whose name I don't know, well exemplifies what Jeremiah says. Now, Jeremiah, writing in the time of the exile, when many Israelites were extremely hostile to the state that had carried them off, Assyria, and they wanted to be released from their captivity, and they didn't give a fig about the Assyrians. And Jeremiah says something completely different. He says, wherever you are, wherever circumstances have landed you, he said, you should work for the common good. And that's exactly what my taxi driver did yesterday. There he was in Rotherfield Grays, and he had business to do. He had to go and pick up his fare in Sunning Common, but he took the time to stop and help sort out my problem. So it's quite easy to be anti-Jeremiah, because he's not a cosy character, and very often he's full of condemnation. But in this particular place, that is to say in Jeremiah 29, and I'd like you please to revisit that chapter when you can, Jeremiah says, work for the good of everyone around you, wherever circumstances have taken you. And that is a message which could easily have come from Jesus, isn't it? Because Jesus tells you not to be fussy about who you help. He says, you can help disreputable people, and that's good, because disreputable people often need help, and you can help foreign people and advise them, as in the Samaritan woman by the well. And you should obey the laws wherever you are. Caesar's head is on the coin you use. So be obedient to the laws that Caesar has put in place, even if really you'd much rather Caesar went off and took his troops away too. So that is our reading from Jeremiah. And then finally, and perhaps mainly, we have the reading from 2 Kings, and that is about Naaman. At least I was brought up to pronounce his name in that way, Naaman. So in fact, when you look at it on the page, it was probably intended to be Naaman. Anyway, I'm 74 years old and I'm a bit stuck in my ways, so Naaman it is. And he was a military commander in the kingdom of Aram, which is now part of modern Syria, and it was up towards Damascus, and he's a very important man, Naaman. But he had this disfiguring skin condition, which is translated in our Bibles as leprosy, but it's not anything like the disease that we now call leprosy. So the disease he had resulted in clumps of hair falling out, and that area of your skin where the hair has fallen out becomes very blonde or even albino, and whatever hair is in that area or adjacent to it becomes yellow and not anything like your natural growth of hair, which, since you come from Aram, is likely to be black. And this disease, once you've caught it, can continue and get worse and worse, and your health can be undermined. And it was awful. It was so embarrassing. And people would shun you because they didn't want to catch the disease. and they didn't understand how they might avoid it. So he's at his wit's end. And it just so happens his wife had a servant girl who had been captured in some confrontation with Israel, because they were fighting each other on and off. And they carried captives away whenever they could. And if you were a young girl, then you ended up as servant to a lady, as happened in this case. And the servant girl said, well, my master Naaman really should go and see a man in Israel who can sort him out. And everybody's a bit dismissive of this, but they think, well, it might be worth a try, mightn't it? I mean, what is there to lose? So Naaman goes to his boss, the king, and says, might I go? Do you mind? And the king says, no, you go and have a try. It would be great if you were cured. So off he goes. And he goes to the king of Israel, who tells him where to find the prophet. And he arrives at the prophet's residence and announces himself, and a servant goes indoors and relays the message. And after a bit, the servant comes back and says, my master says, go wash in the river. Now, you've got to remember that Naaman is a very important man. He's used to a lot of deference. He's used to people paying him great respect and even being frightened of him. So the offhand manner of this Jewish prophet goes down extremely badly with him, and he loses his temper. And he says, right, that's it, I'm off. He said, haven't we got much better rivers in my country, Aram, than you've got here? And he blusters away, and his servant, that is Naaman's servant, says, look, you've been asked to do something very simple. If you'd been asked to do something difficult, you'd have done it, wouldn't you? But as it is, he's just said, go wash in the river. So why not do what he's asked, because good may come of it. So that's what he did, and he washed himself, and lo and behold, it works. Incredible. His disease goes away, and he can't believe it. So he goes back to the prophet Elisha, and he says, look, I'm deeply grateful, and I'm sorry I lost my rag with you. But anyway, your cure has worked, and I see how powerful your God is. And I'd like to give you a gift. And Elisha says, no gifts. I'm God's servant, and I just do what he requires me. So you've been cured, and that's wonderful, but I want you to know that I didn't do it. So no gifts are due to me, but God did it. And so Naaman says, well, if you won't accept a gift, will you perhaps give me 2 wheelbarrows full of the soil around here, so that when I'm at home in Aram, I can worship your God standing on his own soil? But we have the impression that although this was allowed, it's not terribly important. And Naaman, you see, who is a man who respects his own traditions as well as the Jewish one, of which he's the beneficiary, says, look, and when I'm at home, can I please be forgiven for worshipping with my boss, the king? Because I really have to. Will you forgive me for doing this? And then mainly I'm going to worship your God, Yahweh, we would sometimes say, because he is clearly the main one, the most powerful God, and I am going to hold him close to my heart. Now, what has happened here is that Naaman has turned towards God. A foreign military commander who has reasons within his job to be hostile to Israel now turns to Israel as the nation which has the really important God. And he's been given a demonstration, and he's been prompted by that demonstration. And so just as I am prompted by the generosity of the taxi driver who helped me out yesterday to try more earnestly to be a good Samaritan and to follow Jesus' teaching embodied in that parable. So we all, dear friends, have to be prepared to turn towards God. And we will receive numerous prompts. We will receive prompts from our upbringing and from our church going. But let us also recognize those prompts when they occur in our daily lives. And maybe when our own car bursts into flames is a bit of an extreme example, but other prompts occur much more commonly, and I commend them to you. God bless you all. Amen.